Hello and welcome to today's GLOW webinar on Peace and Prejudice. GLOW is an acronym for Genuine Loving Outstanding Women, and it's a series of webinars focused on building a community of compassionately empowered women by connecting with them from the space of the heart. Heartfulness Institute sponsors the GLOW webinars, and Heartfulness Institute teaches relaxation and meditation in schools, universities, community spaces. For me personally, Heartfulness has been a life changer, a game changer on the day I learned to meditate on the source of light in my heart and in the presence of energy, which we call pranahuti or yogic transmission imparted by the guide. Today's webinar is on peace and prejudice. And I'm reminded of the quote by Martin Luther King Jr. Peace is not merely a distant goal that we seek, but a means by which we arrive at that goal. King intended these words as a comment on the Vietnam War specifically and on war generally. However, it makes a lot of sense today as we see the state of racial prejudice and discrimination. This webinar today is commemorating the United Nations International Day of Peace on 21st September. The theme is Shaping Peace Together. I have two beautiful people with me here today. They are not only just erudite, important people in the world, but they are benevolent beings of the heart too. And they are also my very good friends. Please join me in welcoming LaShaun Martin and Jennifer Burden, who are going to have a very engrossed discussion about human equality, justice, dignity, and building upon these to achieve peace, joy, compassion, love in today's times. Thank you so much, LaShaun and Jennifer, for joining me today.
Thank you, Purnima. Such a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Same here. So let me begin by introducing LaShaun and Jennifer. LaShaun is the National Vice President of Operations of Mocha Moms, a nonprofit organization with nearly 100 chapters in 29 states and an online presence of more than 100,000 followers. She's also named as a 100 Power Women of Color, and her portrait is displayed in the Charles Sumner Museum in Washington, D.C. More importantly, this is the key thing, folks. Remember this. LaShaun has released her solo album in June 2020 titled Be Still. It's a soul-stirring anthem of encouragement. And the most important thing is it's international. It's released in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and LaShaun, any other continents?
Not yet, but we're hoping to get there.
Can I have one or two lines of your music? Can you sing?
Sure. Okay, let's see. When you're troubled, frustration is on every hand. When you're tired, don't know if you can stand. Just be still. Know He is God. Just be still. Know He is God.
Be still. It's so poignant if you actually be still and even, ruminate on it. Thank you, LaShaun. It's made my day.
My pleasure.
So my next introduction is, another important, beautiful woman, Jennifer Burden, who is the founder and CEO of World Moms Network. World Moms Network writes from over 30 countries. It has over 70 contributors, and it's listed by Forbes as one of the best 100 websites for women. Jennifer Burden has been named as a Global Influencer Fellow by the United Nations Foundation. She's also been named as the Social Media Fellow by the United Nations Foundation. Jennifer is beginning an Executive Masters of Public Affairs with a concentration in Global Policy at Columbia University in New York City this fall to further her advocacy for women and children. So let's begin the webinar formally. And as we are commemorating the International Day of Peace today, and with so much of other things happening in the world like racial prejudice, discrimination, and when we are working towards human dignity, human equality, I want to start my first question with, how did this all begin? What's happening with this? Why so much of hatred and anger and prejudice? Like, what's the root cause? Where did we all go wrong? What's even happening?
I think that's a great question. For me, it goes way back, to my ancestors who were, taken from Africa, and, those that were here. I'm part Native American, but those that were here, just being treated as second-class citizens, being treated, as slaves, being taken from their country of origin into a land that they did not know, and being treated as if they didn't belong. So for me, it goes way back. Seeing things in today's time, I mean, obviously things are differently because we're more evolved here in America as a country, but the negativity and the racism, and more so the mindset, still remains with lots of people, towards people of color. And so, unfortunately, we're seeing a resurgence or a reoccurrence of things that my grandmother, who is still alive, who will be 91 at the end of this month, and my mother in the 60s, living through the civil rights movement. So unfortunately, we're seeing a repeat of that.
Thank you, LaShaun. My next question is, a lot of conversation is going around about overcoming racial prejudice, how to start doing this. We speak a lot, but what do we actually do? What can people do? If people talk so much about it, why are we doing less, and how can we inspire people to start doing more?
As an American, it bothers me. It bothers me that we live in a country where Black people feel uncomfortable and aren't treated properly. And it's not enough for me to be okay, like say like, oh, well, it's not me. I don't feel that way, and I'm just going to go on with my life. For me, I had to really look inside and think like, no, I want to do something about this. Like, I want to make some change. And what we had talked about before was that this isn't a Black person's problem. Black people did not create this problem of racism in the Americas, and so it shouldn't be delegated to them to solve it alone. And we really need to create partnerships and look at this issue and this problem as something that we can all solve together. And so I want to be part of that. And so where I started is when the Black Lives Matter protest started after the death of George Floyd in the United States. In New Jersey, we were still in quarantine because of COVID-19. And so at the beginning, I was very reluctant to go out of the house to a protest. And so we started with something called the Brown Bookshelf. They were having a virtual Black Lives Matter march, which was fantastic. And they had Black authors, and my daughters and I watched it, and we were really, really motivated to do more. And we started getting ideas for books we wanted to read, and started reading, decided like, look what we're going to read this summer. Let's inundate this with Black authors, and let's get another point of view and perspective. And then from there, our town wound up having a Black Lives Matter march, and we decided to join in because we wanted to be part of this movement to change the course and defeat racism. And so that's how we started here. But I'm learning just along like everyone else, and there's more I can do, there's more I will do, and I'm so glad that we're here today and we're having this conversation. So
thank you, Jen. That was very inspiring, and I hope a lot of people follow your example. My next question is about sustainable human transformation in communities. How do we do this in a way that lasts forever? We don't want one more George Floyd. We don't want one more, another person. We want a sustainable, permanent transformation in ourselves. What are your thoughts on this?
I was actually struck just a few days ago listening to our former First Lady, Michelle Obama, speak at the Democratic National Convention. And one of the things that she said really hit home with me, and that was that our children no longer believe us. They don't believe that we are supposed to treat people well. They don't believe that we are supposed to do right by people. They no longer believe, that we're teaching them right from wrong. We're teaching them to be kind. We're teaching them to, be empathetic to other people. but we as a country are not doing that ourselves. And we're the adults, showing the example to our younger children. So I'll take that from First Lady Michelle Obama in saying that we simply need to learn to be empathetic, to put ourselves in the shoes of others that we are seeing being mistreated. Our children learn by example. They don't learn by what we say. They learn by what we do. And I am constantly teaching my teenage daughters, since they were very little girls, to never discriminate, to always treat people as they want to be treated, and to always come from a loving place. So I think that that's paramount. If we come from a place of love and compassion and empathy in everything that we do, we could eradicate this overnight.
I agree, LaShaun. And I also think that there's empathy, but there's also modeling specific behavior. And something that's come up in several books that I've read is about the white woman with her white children, and say they're in the supermarket or something, and they have a toddler with them, and the toddler yells out, "Look at that black lady!" And the mother, would immediately say, "Shh, like, you can't say that. You can't say that." And so then the children, and so the children grow up to be thinking like, "Oh, that's bad. It's bad if I call someone black." And that's the wrong point, that we need to get across to our children. And so it's kind of like asking parents to when their children are bringing up race, no matter what their age, to point it out and say, yes, she does have black skin, isn't it beautiful? Or, it's not something to be hushed and pushed under the rug. It's something to be celebrated, and to recognize the diversity. And LaShaun, I think you've spoken to this before in previous conversations we've had about when people say, well, I don't see color, I don't see race, and how offensive that is to you,
Right.
And so I think it's kind of important for parents to change their paradigm of how they're talking to their children about race.
Absolutely. Well. That's such a great point. I just immediately thought back to a time, this was several years ago, but a dear friend of mine that I was working with, she brought her sons into work on a day off, and they were toddlers. They were maybe 3 and 4 years old. They were very young little men. And so I kind of got down to their level. They were so adorable, blonde hair, blue eyes. They were just beautiful children. And so I got down to their level, and I put my hand on one of their shoulders, and I said, "Oh my gosh, you're so cute. What's your name?" And he looked up at his mom in complete terror and said, Mommy, wipe it off." My hand was on his shoulder. And so he saw a black hand on his shoulder and immediately told his mom, out of fear, whatever fear that he had learned, about black people, to wipe the color off of his shoulder. And as you said just a moment ago, Jen, his mom said, "Oh my gosh, LaShaun, I'm so sorry. Like, honey, you don't say that. You don't say that. That's so," and then she, went on and on about how she didn't teach her children that way. And later on, I don't know if I'll have an opportunity to share what our relationship is like now, but you're absolutely right. That would have been the optimum teachable moment for her. Instead of explaining it away or, apologizing it away, it would have been a great opportunity to say, this is what an African-American person looks like. Look, compare your skin colors. Yours is lighter, hers is darker, but guess what? We're all human. We all look the same on the inside. We're all loving and compassionate people. That would have been a great way, without getting too, over the top, because he was a little guy. But even something as simple as that, would have been life-changing, in my opinion, for him.
Mm-hmm. So something we've done before with our Girl Scout troop is when we're talking about these things, we say, what about, everyone with blue eye color, yes. Like, okay. And kind of like making people see how silly you know, when we're talking about the color of our eyes, you know what, that's really silly to be differentiating each other by the color of our eyes. Well, you know what's even sillier is differentiating ourselves by the color of our skin. Like it's this social construct that was passed down, and it was based on zero sense. And
Absolutely.
you know, it's something that we need to figure out how do we rid society of this racism.
It's not just about, you know, George Floyd and the you know, the killings that are happening here in the US. It's not just about, you know, the economic disparities. It's not just about the implicit bias. It's so many things, and there's so many microaggressions that people don't even think about. They don't even think about the fact that you say things like blackmail, you know, and that's something negative. Blackballed, that's something negative, but it's attached to the word black. So we could go on and dig really deep into this. We don't have the time because it's much bigger than what it looks on the surface.
For people who aren't Black and they're trying to navigate, you know, how do we help end racism? I think the biggest thing that I learned, that it's okay to make mistakes.
Absolutely.
What's most important is that you're trying. Because if you're not trying, or you're afraid to try, we're not going to get anywhere. And
right.
I think that it takes me out of my comfort zone, and I get worried that I'm going to offend someone. But you know, if I say something stupid, hopefully someone will point it out and be like, oh, no, Jen, you know, you don't say this because, and then I learn, and then I move forward, and I don't make that mistake again, you know. And so that's why going forward, I'm just so willing to try and to dive into this, and, you know, to be here today to talk about this issue.
So actually, my next question was partially answered by Jennifer. I wanted to ask, how can we start learning? Because we speak about mistakes being made and perhaps opportunities being lost. And but it's very natural. Maybe some people are genuinely trying to learn how to do the right thing, and inadvertently they make mistakes. My point is, like, the whole Second World War was started on, you know, trying to exterminate a whole race. That's not right. And we don't want, you know, a war again right now, right? So when loving people make genuine mistakes from both sides, like from people who are trying to learn, people who are having colored skin, how do we move forward? When people make mistakes, how to acknowledge it, learn from it, correct themselves, you know, like, how does this opportunity to correct themselves happen?
So one of the things that just really stood out to me, Purnima, and I actually want you to keep this on the recording because I believe it's a teachable moment. The words that came out of your mouth just now were people with colored skin. When African Americans hear the word colored, it takes them back to the 60s. And let me tell you why. During the civil rights movement, everything was segregated. You couldn't drink out of a faucet. One said white, one said colored, right? Mm-hmm. You couldn't walk into a restaurant, you know, or if you did, the front of the door was white, clearly marked whites only, and the back was marked colored only. So I actually think that it's great that you said that, because it's a teachable moment in that, and this actually goes back to what Jen just said. If you make mistakes, hopefully somebody will care enough to say, hey, you probably should word that a different way. You might want to say something differently, but I know that you're coming from a loving place. I know that you're not being offensive, but if you were here in the States and you said something like that, another Black person who doesn't know you may say, oh my gosh, she's a racist. Well, I know that that's not the case, right? But I think that we, and this goes back to your question, I think that we as an African American or Black or people of color, which is very different than colored people. I know it sounds crazy, but believe me, there's a difference. I think that it's incumbent upon us to take a step back and to take a deep breath and not make the assumption that everyone we encounter that says something wrong is a racist. A lot of times it's simply because they don't know. It only takes a second or two to share just a little bit of information, a little bit of history that will make that person think twice. Now, my girls, my daughters have said to me, they go to a predominantly white private school, and they have said to me, Mom, we don't want to have to be the ones to teach everyone. Why don't they take it upon themselves to learn? And that goes back to what Jen was saying, you know, in reading the books, in reaching out, in, you know, being part of, you know, Black Lives Matter movements and doing all these types of different things that will help her learn. But it's also teaching her children and modeling for her children what they should do in being empathetic, you know, because they can't put them, you can do as much as you can to put yourself in another person's shoes. But if they see their mom being empathetic, if they see their mom being an ally, if they see their mom learning, that's huge. That's really, really huge. So I just wanted to address that you said just now.
Thank you so much, LaShaun. Like,
you're very welcome.
I feel very honored to learn from you today. And
my pleasure.
Yeah, I learned a better thing today. You know, I just completed a course on nonviolent communication or heartful communication. And, you know, in NVC, they say there is always a need for a feeling or, you know, any incident that happens. So according to this NVC's principle, if we address a need, an issue can, you know, potentially be solved or sorted out. So this is based on Marshall Rosenberg's theory. And if I try to superimpose that principle on this issue, you know, what do you think is the need for this dominance? Why racial profiling? What is the need with these misguided, you know, intentions? And I just was wondering, what is the need which needs to be addressed?
I think that the problem and the issue is what LaShaun mentioned earlier, is that because it's part of our country's history, it has become something that's learned, and we need to unlearn it. Because so I think it's important, Purnima, to explain that when we're talking about racism in America, we're not just talking about KKK racism in America. There's also this ingrained subconscious racism outside of white supremacy organizations that is unfortunately prevalent in the US. And this is what we're up against. These are the hearts and the minds we're trying to change. And I think education is the best way, because we talked earlier about how racism was something that was created. It didn't always exist. And then it was passed down to us, and it's not right. And we know it's not right. And so we need to change that. And the way we change that is through our actions and through our words and having these conversations. And like we said earlier, being fearless and saying like, okay, I might make a mistake, but I'm going to try here, you know, and if I get it wrong, you know, I'm going to learn and I'm going to do better. And so back to how do we change minds? I think it's education through example, from a corporate level, education by corporate training on this, and having these types of conversations like we're having now, and being, you know, completely open about it. And, you know, those types of things. What do you guys think?
I think you're spot on. I think education is the way. We can't really change the hearts and the mindsets of people unless we explain why what they're doing is not acceptable. Because just to say it's not acceptable, you would assume that the average person, you know, seeing someone killed on the street wouldn't think that's okay. But there may be some that think, well, you know, the police have every right to do whatever they need to do to a citizen to, you know, arrest them or detain them or whatever reason. But education is so important, because if we don't have police officers that learn and that are trained about, you know, racism, about profiling, about those types of things, then we should expect them to go out on the street with empathy, but we can't expect them to go out on the street with empathy if they've not been properly trained. So what we've been doing through Mocha Moms, our national, one of our national nonprofit organizations for mothers of color, is that we've been having forums with police officers, with different organizations that train police officers, asking them questions about what they are teaching the police officers in their training, asking them questions about how our children can abide by whatever guidelines that not only the officer is giving them on the street when they're driving or when they're out with their friends, but how they can be proactive in not looking or seeming offensive in any way to the officer, as to bring that profiling onto themselves. And it's a sad thing because you're a Black person, you can't change that about yourself. But officers may see that, okay, you have on a hoodie, or you have on, you know, dark clothing, or, you know, you have on a graphic t-shirt that maybe has, you know, some type of cultural, you know, saying on it or something. And those things to some people are targets. And so I cannot tell you how many people, mothers and fathers and different friends and family members of mine, have simply told their children, and this is the saddest thing, it makes me emotional, do whatever they say so that you can make it home alive. Even if you feel as though you're being discriminated against, we will deal with whatever we have to deal with in filing cases, or, you know, bringing charges against the officers, or, you know, hiring an attorney, whatever the case is, after you have made it home alive.
What has social media done, do you think, for the for this movement to end racism?
That's a great question, Jen. I think social media has done a lot. And I think the beauty of not having to be in the same place to communicate with someone or to share information about what's going on in our country and what we can do to educate and prevent some of these issues, I think it has done the absolute best. Now, many people are against social media, but I will tell you, I have seen more people that have been against social media since this pandemic and COVID-19 than ever before. You know, there were some people that said, oh my gosh, I would never get on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, and all of them are on there now. But I think it's a wonderful thing because it allows us to share information. It allows us to, you know, to invite people, you know, to forums like this. It allows us to have town halls with our allies, with our white allies, where we can educate others. We can record sessions like this. We can share them on social media. We can help to educate people. The paradigm has shifted, you know, with social media. It has magnified things in such a way that we would have never been able to magnify them in years past. So in my opinion, social media has been a phenomenal tool. I don't know if as many people would know about, you know, George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. They wouldn't know about those folks if not for social media. Guess what? Traditional media is not sharing those stories. Social media is.
Because that's what I was going to say. Like in years past, if something, you know, if there was something that happened, would it have just been like a headline, you know, maybe not frontline headline, but headline in the newspaper, and then someone would read it and then they turn the page and they would never go back to that. But I feel like social media is in your face. And so we have this ability to be like, this happened to me, and I'm going to share this with you. And then your friends are like, what? Yeah, that totally can happen because, you know, I've seen that happen, or it's happened to me too, and I'm going to share it. And I think social media has really helped amplify the Black voices in America.
It's one thing to read about something. It's, you know, another thing to hear about something, and you can kind of distance yourself from it. You know, when you don't know the person, you know, or when you're not in the same area as the person. But if I post something on my page about something personal that has happened to me, and I have friends who don't look like me that read that, they have a completely different level of compassion because they know me personally. And they know it's something I've been through personally, versus reading about something in the headlines, you know, of someone that's completely detached from you or your, you know, circle of friends or colleagues. But when you hear that something has happened to me personally, it's a game changer. It's a game changer. And I believe that's what social media has done. You know, I was speaking about the situation earlier with the little boy, the toddler. Well, just recently, his mom posted something very racist on social media. And initially I paused about sharing it, but I sat with it for several days, and I just had to kind of process it internally. And I was very emotional about it because I've known this woman half of my life. She made reference on social media to the protests that are going on, and that an African-American woman who was protesting would look better hanging from a tree. And number one, I couldn't believe that my friend, who I've known for half of my life, would say something like that. So what I did was I inboxed her a message, and I said to her, I received this message and I want to give you the opportunity to explain. This is not the person that I know. And her response back to me was, I meant what I said. Destroying property was just appalling to her. And in her mind, you know, this woman would look better hanging from a tree. She basically supported what she said. And when I said to her, you know, you have to understand how offensive that is. You have to understand, me hearing that as your friend, who you have supported openly and privately for years. She said to me, well, LaShaun, I don't really even see you as a Black person. I had to read that a few times to fully digest that, because what it said to me is that because my skin is maybe lighter than some Black people that she knows, but because my skin is lighter, because she may see me at a certain level of success, whatever it is that's in her head, she separated me from that Black woman who in her mind should be hanging from a tree. In my mind, I am no different than that Black woman. In African-American history, when during the slavery era, the darker hued Black people were required to work in the fields picking the cotton. The lighter hued Black people were allowed to work in the house outside of the heat, being maids and servants to the masters and assistants or slaves to the master's wives. So there is a term in the African-American community called house nigger or field nigger. And the difference in the two is completely by the hue of your African-American skin. She separated us in that way that is so offensive to African-American people as a whole, because she took me out of my culture and set me over to the side somewhere as if I'm superior to anyone else in my community. When I share that with friends and colleagues of mine who are white, they are appalled. They're just like, oh my gosh, LaShaun, how could she possibly do something like that? But it makes a connection and makes them understand racism a little bit more because it's connected to someone who they know and love.
I mean, it's just that story alone. It's a description of a psyche that, you know, I feel like is new to me. Like, oh my gosh, this goes on, you know?
Wow.
It's really important, and it's important for you to tell that story and for people to hear it, because it shows, it reflects how the problem is bigger than we think it is.
Absolutely.
And because, you know, so my understanding is that, you know, you having a relationship with this woman as a friend, there were a lot of assumptions on your part, also thinking that how she saw you, and how, hey, if she's respecting me, then she probably respects Black people because I'm Black. And that's not what happened there. One time I was younger, and I was with a friend, a guy who was Black, and we were just, you know, kidding around. And I said, oh, I called him boy.
Oh.
And I would call a white guy hey, you know, boy, like
Right.
I didn't call him boy because he was black. And he was like, what did you just call me? And I was like, oh, I
Right.
called you boy. And he was like, do you know? And luckily he knew me to be like, well, Jen doesn't know what the heck she's doing here. We all make these mistakes. And so he sat there and he told me, he's like, no, that's what, you know, people called black people in the fields. And
Yes.
I was like, what? I didn't know that. Oh my God.
Right.
I would have never called you that if
Right.
I knew that. Oh my gosh. You know, and you know, I don't call anyone boy now. Like that was just like, to me, I felt so horrible, you know, and it's all about, you know, also the intention, you know, like he knew
Right.
that my intention, so that's why he was like, what? Like, wasn't expecting that. And I didn't know what I was doing was wrong. And
But he took that moment to educate you. Isn't that a wonderful thing?
yes.
I'm so getting so educated with this conversation. I just can't even say how much, you know. This deep-rooted prejudice, it's just not a prejudice of color or race or even education or even privilege. It's basically prejudice of, you know, anything. You know, how do we take our conversation to the next level of overcoming prejudice of all kinds? In India, you have a prejudice of caste system. It's like people are born in a lower caste, people are born in an upper caste. You know, in the world over, there are so many different types of prejudices. It's of course, color and race is a very important prejudice which is happening right now. How to overcome prejudice? That's something I think, you know. Should we talk about that a little bit?
Well, I guess I have two things that I can, stories that I can add to that is, one, the first time I had been in an experience where someone was prejudiced towards me was, you know, as you're growing up and they're asking like, oh, you know, where do you come from? What countries do you come from? And we're learning about, you know, the United States as this big melting pot in school and in elementary school. My ancestors had come from Poland in Europe and then in Lebanon from the Middle East. Mm. And so, so everyone, you know, growing up kind of knew that about me. And then, you know, that kind of turned into like a joke. Oh, the stupid terrorist. And I'm like,
oh my God.
You know, and it, you know, it's kind of like, oh, because Polish people are shown to be stupid in jokes because of how easily Germany came in and invaded them in World War II, and so there's a lot of Polish jokes that go around about how you know, they're not very smart, which, you know, isn't the case. And then with my my Lebanese ancestry, they attach that to, you know, terrorism in the Middle East. And I was just kind of like, what? No, like, you know, if they just knew my Arabic situ, they wouldn't, the last thing on their mind would be terrorism. Are you kidding? Like, yeah, maybe terrorism for making you, she'd make you eat too much, but you know, like, she was just so loving and so kind. And, you know, and I think it was that perspective, you know, not being like everyone else, because I had, you know, at least in my area, these unique heritages that helped me see the world a little bit differently. And then to compound that, later on in life, I remember after the September 11th attacks, I remember like going down, you know, seeing so much on social media about just really, really negative to Muslim people. And I was embarrassed, but I was just so mad that people could treat Muslim people like this, you know, after September 11th, because once again, it was that association with anything Middle Eastern, okay, anything Muslim, you know, has to be bad. And so we're going to target them and we're going to, you know, make fun of them. And I didn't agree with this at all. And it was actually one of the reasons why I started World Moms blog, which became World Moms Network now, because I kind of felt like, well, if they just knew, like, just like, you know, my friends growing up, if they just knew my Arabic situ, you know, or if they just knew these other voices from around the world, you know, can we get rid of this us versus them type thing. And you know, and LaShaun, you show me how, you know, what a rockier path it is than I, you know, may naively think it is, because it's not, you know, get to know Purnima, she's from India, but that might not take away their prejudice of what they feel about India, you know, and that's something, you know, that I learned today, you know, from you, but I kind of feel like, you know, let's get these voices out there. Let's get people feeling comfortable about getting to know people from all around the world, from different places, who look so different, who practice, you know, religion and everything so differently. But you know what? We all have in common that we're all human beings. And it I guess this all ties into the peace day too. Like, that's what I want, you know?
Yeah.
I think we can all sit at the table. There's a spot for everyone at our table. And we just need to figure out how to get people there, you know?
Yeah.
That's a great point. I was actually thinking the same thing. If each of us would take the time to sit down and have a conversation with someone or a group of people who don't look like us. When was the last time that any of us invited someone over for dinner, pre-COVID-19, invited someone over for dinner, you know, who didn't look like us? You know, when was the last time we connected, you know, with a colleague and sat down and had, you know, lunch, you know, during the middle of the workday? You know, when is the last time you took it upon yourself prior to George Floyd to go to something specific to learning educationally about racism? You know, it's the great thing to do now, right? But what happened prior to George Floyd, right? So look at your life prior George Floyd, look at it now, and then start making plans to what you want to do differently in the future. You know, sit down and have those conversations. I have a great friend of mine. She has these lunches or dinners quarterly with friends of hers. None of them are from the same background. And she does that on purpose so that we can all learn from each other. And it's a way to, you know, be more empathetic, you know. And Purnima, this goes back to you for a moment. When you said the word, you know, colored before, I took an opportunity to educate you. But what if I were in your country? Or what if we were having a conversation about India and I said something offensive, you know, about your culture? When you have those deliberate conversations with people who don't look like you, it forces you to learn. It makes you learn just in regular, normal dialogue. Jen, you notice when you said the word boy, I, as an African-American woman, I went, oh, because I know what that means, right? You wouldn't know what that meant. Purnima wouldn't know what that meant. But if you sit down just in simple, no stress, easy going, have a meal, you know, and just have some conversation with people, things would, they would look much better than they do now. I think we would live our lives from a different place.
Something that we didn't get to that I really wanted to talk about, and is, so LaShaun and I had that opportunity. We met through the UN Foundation's Shot at Life campaign for vaccinations for the kids who need it most on the globe. And we were both on a delegation to Uganda together in, you know, in Africa. And one of my most like, aha, like, oh my God, I'm so happy and I'm in the room moments came with, it had to do with LaShaun. LaShaun was walking around Uganda and people were coming up to her and saying, oh, you're Ugandan. And she'd be like, well, I know my ancestors are from Haiti, but, you know, I don't know anything from there. I'm not sure. I don't know anything about Uganda, you know, Ugandan in my bloodline or whatever. And, but so that was one person. And then there'd be like, we'd go to like we'd drive like 4 hours and go somewhere else and someone would say, ah, you're Ugandan. And we came to this table at the end of our delegation, and we were talking about, you know, things that we had learned, and she got up, and it was just like, LaShaun, and I should have you say it about how you felt like you had come home, and having witnessed all those people come up to you and say that was incredible and beautiful.
It was. It felt like a homegoing and a homecoming, and I felt welcomed. Just I felt like they embraced me just with love, as if I was, you know, one of their family members. I remember us going to a church service, and then when we finished the church service, we were going to do vaccinations afterwards for some of the young children there. And there was in particular this baby who was severely malnourished, and they were able to give her vaccinations right after that service. And when I walked out of the room, a woman came running up to me, and she was saying something to me that I couldn't understand in their dialect. And a translator came over and said, "She's saying that she knows you." And I said, "Well, no, I'm here from America," and, went through my whole story that I had been going through, Jen, right? And she said, "No, she wants you to know that you look like her daughter." And her daughter had since passed away.
Oh.
And then when he explained to her where I was from, she asked me, could she hug me? And she just hugged me and she embraced me, as if I was her own child. And I have to tell you, that trip alone was such a life-changing, time for me. But that moment, I will never forget as long as I live, because I was able to bring some part of love or peace or something to that woman.
As we have reached almost the conclusion of this webinar, let us have that experiential heartfulness meditation session. We are humans, we are all one within one world. We are united, maybe not politically or economically, or maybe not even in our color or race, but through the love that we have for each of us. I hope that such a world will come into being where, I just see a small sample here, a very small sample, just the three of us, minuscule, atomic. But, the world is made up of such tiny atoms and molecules. And maybe this small one atom with the three of us will multiply and it will become a super molecule. And maybe the world will be just as loving. And that possibility is always there in my heart. And I'm sure it's there in the heart of both of you. So today I'm going to share the universal prayer, which is a daily heartfulness practice that is dedicated to the welfare of all. What we generally do is at 9 p.m. sharp local time, everyone who would like to do this can do this. You don't need any prior experience or practice, but just wherever you are, whatever you're doing at 9 p.m. local time, stop all your activities for just a few minutes. Meditate maybe for 15 minutes, thinking that all brothers and sisters in this world are being filled with love, devotion, and real faith is growing stronger in them. I use the word faith not in a sense of religious connotation, but I use the word faith in really the essence, the faith which is in all of us, which is growing stronger in all of us. It shall be of immense value to us. And I think only our practical experience will reveal that. So, let us sit together for a few minutes, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and meditate on this fact that all brothers and sisters all over the world are being filled with love and devotion, and real faith is growing in all of us. Let's begin. Please open your eyes when you're ready. Thank you so much for joining me in this heartfulness meditation session. There are other practices like the relaxation, meditation, evening rejuvenation or cleaning, and the deep meditation in the night. All this information is available on the heartfulness.org website, and I encourage you to visit it. Towards the end of this webinar, a lot of information about the heartfulness practices, where it's available, how to contact a trainer, how to download the Hearts app, the Heartfulness magazine, and other resources will be available. Please avail them. This conversation is just a beginning, and I hope we develop practices of the heart, of compassion, of loving kindness, which could bring a complete shift in awareness. Heartfulness Education offers a list of comprehensive programs for students and teachers to teach values, ethics, principles of life, and probably this could be a precursor of a peaceful child growing up into a peaceful adult living in a peaceful society. So I would like to just play this video which shares a list of Heartfulness Education offerings for your information.
Welcome to the Heartfulness Education programs. Our vision is to enable teachers and students to live a balanced, purposeful, and a happy life using heart-based practices, leading to a brighter, more sustainable future. Heartfulness is all about living a life full of heart. Through a simple set of practices, including meditation and relaxation, we learn to regulate the mind and purify the heart. This leads to inner transformation, helping us to expand our potential. Heartfulness Education offers a comprehensive suite of programs that include training on socio-emotional skills for teachers and age-appropriate curriculum on life skills and values for students. Our program is based on an integrated delivery model that empowers teachers to deliver our curriculum to their students. The effect of Heartfulness programs is subtle and soft, and it nurtures inspiration from within. As teachers become heartful and students become joyful, these programs begin to promote balance and holistic growth in schools, leading to an overall well-being in the society. From the teacher's perspective, while they are devoted to making a positive change in students' life, they often face challenges to meet the social and emotional demands of today's classroom environment. Our Heart program for teachers is a year-long training program that provides essential tools and life skills needed for their overall well-being. Through various workshops, group sessions, and one-on-one trainings, our program helps teachers transform into becoming heartful and centered teachers.
These 3 days we are staying in this Inspire camp. The serene atmosphere itself is making us to be more peaceful.
Wholeheartedly, how the profession of a teacher can be shifted to student-oriented. That was very fantastic according to me.
We had different sessions in which various methods were taught, and they were so interesting that it makes classroom a dynamic place.
From students' perspective, while students become subject matter experts, most of them need to be guided on basic life skills and core human values. We offer the Heartfulness Way curriculum, which is based on the core human values as outlined by the United Nations. This curriculum has been developed by an international team comprising school teachers, university lecturers, occupational therapists, counselors, PhDs in education, and experienced facilitators. For every grade, we have developed 2 books, One is the lesson plan for teachers and the other is an activity workbook for students. As teachers and students work through the various lessons of the Heartfulness Way curriculum, the values they imbibe intensely influence the quality of the relationship between the teacher and the student. As a result, joy and trust develop in the classroom, allowing for academic and extracurricular goals to be achieved.
We find the changes slow but steadily. These changes are coming in. When I speak to the facilitators, I do get certain feedback in certain issues, especially certain classes like class 11th or 10th where there are problems. Those are also being sorted out thanks to these lesson plans. The children open up, the teachers are open to it.
For students of grades 10 to 12, we have the HELP program, Heartfulness Experience Life's Potential. This is a 16-week certificate course on life skills integrated with heartfulness meditation tools. Through highly interactive videos, the students learn essential life skills on various topics, and every session is integrated with an experiential practice on heartfulness meditation tools for self-development. For more information on Heartfulness education programs, please contact us at education@heartfulness.org or visit our website at education.heartfulness.org.
Thank you for joining me today, and I wish you all a wonderful International Day of Peace.